Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, Imitation of Life. The Goddess Next Door helps a young black girl overcome racism during the era of Jim Crow in this Golden Age Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Imitation of Life in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. I got a comment from one of my viewers who stated he wanted to know what was the difference between a black writer writing a black character and a white writer writing a black character. And there's a big difference between when a white writer writes a black character and a black writer writes a black character. Now, in writing, people can only write what they know. And because most white people are living outside of the black community and see the black community from the outside and looking in, they can only tell you about small things that they know about the black community when they create a black character. And that's why oftentimes black characters created by white creators, like your Falcons, like your Luke Cages, and your Black Panthers, often they're nicely created as black characters, but they just don't have the richness, the depth, the complexity, and the multidimensionality of a character like an Icon, a Static, or a John Haynes, or an Isis, or an Easting, because a black writer or a black creator in most cases is coming from the black community. They've lived in the black community. They know what's going on in the black community. And because they live in the black community, they can tell a richer and more complex story. And I could see that in episodes of Static Shock back in the early 2000s. The late, great Dwayne McDuffie, oftentimes in episodes of Static Shock, did a great job of talking about black issues in the Static Shock show, and bringing light to things as related to black culture and the black experience. And when you have a black creator, they can shine a light on black culture and the black experience in a way that white writers just would not be able to, because they just don't understand the nuances as related to the culture, nor do they understand the experience of being black. Now, I could easily see that in what happened with Cheo Hodari Coker's Luke Cage, because when you compare Cheo Hodari Coker's Luke Cage to something like Greg Berlanti's black characters on Arrow, there's a complete difference in the portrayal of black people on these shows. Now, on Greg Berlanti's Arrow, we have John Diggle and we have Mr. Terrific. And your John Diggle, because he's a black character created by a man, is oftentimes shown as being submissive and subservient to Oliver Queen. And that's why I would look at him and say he's more like a butler to Oliver Queen than being a rich and multidimensional character. And when I look at the way your Mr. Terrific was just butchered on Arrow, it shows me this is what happens when you let white writers get a hold of black characters. What they will do is try to find ways to minimize that character and devalue them. And what they did with Mr. Terrific, that was just egregious. This was a character that in the comics is the world's third smartest man, a gifted athlete, and someone who was on the level of Black Panther at Marvel and Batman in the DC universe. But in the Arrow show, he is shown to be a bumbling, stumbling gay man. And that was done, again, to devalue the Mr. Terrific character and show him as less than, and make the white characters like Oliver Queen appear to be superior, instead of it being where all the characters have strengths and weaknesses. But when we go to Cheo Hodari Coker's Luke Cage, we get a completely different portrayal of black characters. And when you watch Cheo Hodari Coker's Luke Cage, you see a richness to the black community, black culture. And when you were watching the show, you were literally taken into the black community, and you see all the things that go on in the black community, because Chio Hodari Coker and the writers of Luke Cage are not just drawing from the source material of a comic, they are drawing from their own life experiences. And because they are drawing from their own life experiences, they can tell you things about black culture and experiences in the black community that a white writer just wouldn't understand. I watched many episodes of those 2 seasons of Luke Cage and saw so many things that I grew up with as a kid in the South Bronx, and things that I grew up and that I knew from living in the black community to be true. And it's all those little nuances about black culture and the black experience that make Luke Cage come alive as a television show, because we saw the relationships, dynamics between Luke Cage and the brothers on the block. We saw things as related to the unwritten social rules of manhood and the unwritten social codes of being a black man. We saw things as related to black culture and the black experience. We saw things as related to black history. And the reason why Chio Hodari Coker and the producers of Luke Cage were able to give us such a rich picture in the Luke Cage television show is because they were writing about something they knew about, because they knew what the black experience was, they knew what black culture was all about, and they could really tell a great story about being a black hero because it was coming from a black man. And because it was coming from a black man, we were getting an accurate picture of black manhood and black masculinity on screen. And that was something that we really don't get a chance to look at, because oftentimes when it comes down to these black characters created by white people, we often get the white person's view of those characters, because Luke Cage originally was a character, again, created by 2 white comic creators, and he was made to be their view of black. Same thing with Black Panther. But with Chio Hodari Coker's adaptation of Luke Cage, we got to see this character changed in a way that stayed true to the spirit of the comic books about this hero from Harlem, but was true to who we were in the black community, and was true to black culture and true to the black experience. So when you have a black writer writing a story featuring a black lead character, oftentimes they will be able to tell a, again, richer and more multidimensional story, because they can draw from things from their life experiences growing up. They can draw from things that they know about the culture that they have been taught by their parents, and they can draw from things that they have learned in black history. And this is something I do in my writing, whether it be a story like The Temptation of John Haynes, where I can take the John Haynes character and show you what it means to be a black man today, and how you can struggle even with racism, even if you are someone like a CEO. That's something you wouldn't see from a traditional white creator. They wouldn't understand what we go through when we're out and about on the street. That's something we know as black men, because we live with this every day. We live with having to be followed around in a store, like I talked about in The Temptation of John Haynes, and being racially profiled, all based on an accusation of a white person or assumptions of a white person. Or I could explore things as related to what happened to the Eastine character when she went out shopping while black. And when I did in The Temptation of John Haynes, would show the nuances between the racism that black men encounter and the racism that black women encounter in these situations. And many people won't see that difference of what racism black women encounter with white women, or the racism black men encounter with white men and black women, but in a traditional story written by a white writer, because they don't understand what that experience is, nor do they understand things like the unwritten social rules as related to dealing with those situations. That was something I went in depth when I was writing The Temptation of John Haynes, in discussing that problem that black people encounter while shopping or dealing with things like racial profiling in those chapters in later on in these towards the end of the second act of The Temptation of John Haynes. I was able to talk about that, and that's something a white writer just wouldn't understand, nor would a white writer really understand things as related to the black class structure. And that's something I learned about doing research, reading books like Our Kind of People, Man Child in the Promised Land, and a bunch of other books that talked about the black elites. And that's something that we really have not seen explored in many of these black characters. We just see them as characters who just have black skin, but they really don't have much substance. It takes a black creator to really dig deep and give you that substance, like I did with characters like The Temptation of John Haynes, where I show you the things that John Haynes has to deal with as related to not only with race in the outside world, but he also has to deal with class issues in the black community, and he also has to deal with issues as related to culture. And I also deal with these race and class issues with the ISIS character, where I talk about, again, the whole thing, like in the early ISIS books, like the first ISIS, I talked about race and class, and I also talk about it in depth in ISIS Imitation of Life, because black people, we know the culture, we know the experience, and we know what we've experienced, and we want to be able to get that story out to other readers. And I learned a lot about that from the late, great Dwayne McDuffie, who, when he was developing Static Shock, he made every effort to really show us a richer, more multidimensional picture of black people on the Static Shock show and on the Milestone comics that came before it, because a lot of people will just think of these Milestone books as blackety black, as Diversity in Comics once said in one of his videos. But what your Dwayne McDuffie was doing, and the work creators at Milestone were doing with Milestone Comics, was giving us that picture of black culture and the black experience we would not get from a Marvel comic outside of a writer like a Christopher Priest. Now, a lot of people, they will look at Christopher Priest's Black Panther run, and they'll say it's the greatest run out there, but there was a reason why that run was so great, and that was because Christopher Priest came from his experience of being black and being able to understand, can present to the readers what it meant to be a black hero. So when I was reading his Black Panther, it really, again, gave us an insight into what it meant to be a black hero. He was able to put a fresh perspective on him, and that perspective became the definitive run for the character in the mid-2000s and the early 2000s, because, again, Christopher Priest came from the black experience, and he was able to put that perspective on that character. And that's, again, something I'm trying to do right now with my characters, is give you that richer, more multidimensional picture of black culture, the black experience, and be able to open up readers to what it means to be black in America, and show you how that relates to the mission of a character like a John Haynes or like an Isis, or to show you how different characters in different subcultures, like a Matilda Crowley deals with being black in the goth subculture, or a Colleen Anderson deals with being black as being part of a black sorority like the Thetas. And I want to give people an understanding of the difference of it, because, again, a black writer, they're going to go out of their way to give you that richer, multidimensional picture, because they have lived this, they have experienced it, or they have heard of it and have heard from others in their friends and family regarding it. So they can give you the richest and broadest picture of it. And that picture with all the details in it can give you a really clear picture of black people and black culture because they have lived in the black community. They have been a part of the culture. And because they've been a part of the culture, they can tell you a story with more detail and give you a better understanding of things. And that's something a white writer in most cases can't do because most white writers are on the outside looking in and their characters are coming from that white perspective. And in most cases, they are all about getting white acceptance and they're not talking about things from the black perspective because a black writer who really cares about black people, they're going to want to give you a picture of black life, not try to give you a picture of a hero who is trying to fit in with white people, but they're going to be talking about doing things for other black people. And that was one of the things that I liked the most about Luke Cage is that Luke Cage, because it was coming from a black perspective, was about Luke protecting the black community, not trying to fit in with other heroes or seek acceptance from other heroes. That was something that I was doing with the John Haynes character in books like The Temptation of John Haynes and The Man Who Rules the World. And it was something I was doing with the Isis and the Eastine characters in their series of books, is showing how these black characters were about taking care of their community, taking care of their business, and it wasn't about seeking out white acceptance the way many black characters created by white creators actually do. Because when I look at characters like your Black Panthers and your Luke Cages, when they're written by white people in the Falcon, it's all about them from the perspective of them being accepted by whites, whereas a black writer is going to write that character where they're about taking care of business in their own communities and protecting their own communities because it's more about something that the writer is trying to tell a story about from what they know and give people a better picture of the black experience, not about this character trying to integrate and find validation and approval from others, but it's about them learning to value themselves and be a valuable part of their own community. So that's something that a black writer also brings to the table when they're writing a character. They're going to show you this character's mission in a way that shows you why they are valuable to their community, why they are an asset to the community, and why we should care about their stories. That's something that we don't get usually from many white writers out there, because when they write these characters, again, it's just about them picking a black character and not making a character who is black. If you'd like to pick up my stories featuring African American heroes like Isis, John Haynes, Eastine, Matilda Crowley, and Colleen Anderson, you can do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. There you will find all the books of the SJS Direct universe, and you will also find my men's issues titles as well. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.